Welcome back to The Knot. I'm Scott Freymuller. This is Shelly Netco. We're doing the He Said, She Said portion of the show. And today we're going to talk about ultimatums and threats, another red flag, unhealthy behavior in a relationship. So let's hear what you got on this one.
Oh my gosh. I was trying to think, when we talked about doing this, I was trying to think if I've ever given someone an ultimatum. And I don't think I have, but I've definitely made threats.
Threats like what?
I don't know, just like I was going to leave. I've definitely threatened to leave.
Why would you do that?
Because I should have.
Really?
Uh-huh.
So, well, that's a good one to unpack.
Right?
Oh, okay, so let me ask you this.
And we're done. Clap.
Yeah. So is that like a normal thing you do in a relationship? Like when you get mad, are you like, hey, this is bullcrap, like I should leave?
No, this was in a toxic situation that it just went back and forth all the time. Yeah. But I'd never done that in my life. And then all of a sudden, and I was like, who am I? Yeah. That was like the beginning of the awakening.
So to me, an ultimatum and a threat are the same.
Really?
Yeah. Here's why I say that. In my toxic relationship, eventually we're not going to talk about us anymore, right? Eventually we're going to talk about, like, no, I'm teasing you.
The idea is this stuff resonates, hopefully, with people.
I'm joking
and they're like,
you.
wait, that's me.
So I remember, towards the end, when I started getting my self-esteem back and my self-worth back and not accepting being treated like a doormat, I would be like, hey, if you talk to me like that, I'm going to leave. That's an ultimatum.
So is that a threat or an ultimatum?
Kind of both. But it's an ultimatum. If you talk to me like you call me an effer, or you're disrespectful, or whatever, if you start like degrading me and talking down to me, I'm going to leave because I don't accept that anymore. So let's not talk like that.
I see it as a threat.
Okay. So then they do it and you leave. Or, we talked about, we had vacation situations where it would be like, you can come with me on vacation, but only for 2 of the days we're going to go. The other 5 days are going to be my friends. And I'd be like, wait a second, are you serious right now? Like, are we in a relationship or not in a relationship? Like, I can't even believe you'd say that, because in a relationship, we would come first, right? Not your friends. And an ultimatum would be, hey, if that's the deal, then this isn't going to work for me.
That's definitely an ultimatum.
That's an ultimatum, right?
Sure.
And I think the ultimatum and or the threat, like you're saying, is essentially, like, that's a huge red flag, and also an indication of, hey, man, the end's coming.
Right. or you already missed it.
And here's the other problem with that, too.
The end came, you jumped over it, and then you ran back around and you started over again.
Yeah, you jumped off the cliff, and then you, like, swung back around and landed back up there to do it again. So speaking of that, swinging back around and landing back up there on that cliff that you are threatening to jump off of.
Right.
If you give somebody an ultimatum and they don't do what you're asking, well, now you're on the hook. Now you're on the hook.
You just sold yourself out.
And if you don't do what you said, then now they own you anyways. Now you have zero self-worth.
Well, they already did, because you made an ultimatum.
That's true. That is very true.
Right?
So the unhealthy portion of that is just unhealthy. Like, you shouldn't make threats.
No.
You should say what you're going to do and do it.
Right.
Hey, this isn't working for me right now. Is there a way we can fix this?
There's a version of non-toxic situations I've seen, though, with people who say they're, and I've seen this in several situations. They've been dating for 5 years, whatever, and say the female wants to get married.
Okay.
And she says, well, if we're not engaged by Christmas,
that's an ultimatum,
then I'm going to leave. But they're not in a toxic relationship.
That's toxic.
No, I mean, they're not in like a super...
That's toxic, though. That is toxic.
It's very unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's a very unhealthy statement.
Right.
But, and then a lot of times the guy will, like, he'll go get the engagement ring, and then they'll get engaged, and then that's...
But he's doing that under pressure.
He's doing it under pressure.
So let's flip that. In a healthy situation, a couple would say, hey, like...
They're talking about their future.
Yeah, hey, in the next couple of years, I'd really love to be married. Like, how do you feel? How do you feel this is going? Is there... can we communicate better? Can we do things different? Do you want to have date night? Like, what can we do? Because I'd really love to be married. That's a goal of mine in my life.
Right.
And I'd like to have kids or whatever it is.
Right.
Same thing with, like the vacation type thing, right? That my example is, hey, I really want to go on vacation as a couple and plan things together, because that, that's intimacy.
Right.
Right? And that's like building a life together. And when we talk about people saying who they are all the time, when they're not willing to do that, they're saying basically like, hey, I'm not really vested in this.
Right.
I'm not really interested in you.
Well,
nor am I interested in spending time with you.
Right.
Or having a future with you.
Yes.
So,
and especially if it's that like that year 5 situation, you would think a couple's having that conversation throughout the 5 years. Are we going to get married? You know, do we want to stay together? Do we want to have kids? We already bought a house. Like, what's going on?
Right.
So they're already having those conversations.
yeah, and that's I think it goes back to, you know, communication, compromise, all those types of things. And you're talking about, man, that's something to avoid an ultimatum and avoid a threat. You have those conversations in the beginning of your relationship.
Sure.
Like, hey, what are your goals here?
Right.
What's your goal in 5 years? Is it to be married?
Right.
Is it to be married and have kids? Is it to have a home together? Do we just want to spend our lives together and be committed without having marriage?
Right.
Like, that's shit you talk about in the beginning, right? Like, what are your goals? What are our goals here for this relationship? As soon as you're committed. That's a healthy way to do it, in my opinion. That's something I never did.
But you know what? You just said something that made me think, what if a couple doesn't have any additional conversations over 5 years? And then in the back of her mind, she's holding on to that 5-year mark. And then all of a sudden she's like, hey, if we're not engaged by Christmas, it's 5 years. Where's
And
my
that's
ring?
unhealthy anyways. So
Right.
it should end anyway.
Yeah.
What's the
And
point?
it's like,
What's the point of not communicating?
Where's the constant communication? Where's the teamwork?
And that we're describing unhealthy relationships. We're in a healthy relationship. It would look like constant communication. It would look like goals. It would look like planning. It would look like, and when I say goals, it's not like a goal of getting married. A goal could be going on vacation. A goal could be, hey, wouldn't it be great to go X?
Right.
Or wouldn't it be great to have our family in? Or wouldn't it be great to plan a Christmas party? Or wouldn't it be great? You know what I'm saying? Like, those are goals. Those are events in your life that you can plan for and build a future with. And it's when you're not planning is when I think you start to get that division. That's when you lose your intimacy. And the ultimatums and threats come from that, because it comes from like a control thing. Like, oh shit, well, I need to know now then. Or, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave. Or, hey, if we're not married in 5 years.
Right.
And, you know, your example, I know some people would do that too, is leave that in the back of their mind and not communicate that.
Right.
And then at 5 years, they're like, I'm out.
Right.
You know, that's like, how is that fair?
How is that fair?
Yeah, because things, like, obviously things were falling apart along the way.
Sure.
You know?
And imagine how they could have changed if it was just like a constant conversation, or even if it was a couple times a year that you brought up what your partnership was, and if you both wanted the same thing with marriage or whatnot.
Sure. I think that's a constant communication thing though, right? Like, if you're actually engaged with somebody and you choose them, you're going to know where they're at all the time.
Sure.
I mean, I know where some of my friends are at all the time.
Right.
You know? I mean, I just, if you're intimate with somebody and you're close with somebody and that's your person, which it should be to be in a marriage or a committed relationship, well then, you know, you wouldn't have an ultimatum and you wouldn't have to do a threat. And you know what? You wouldn't have to tell somebody you're going to leave if they talk to you like you're a piece of crap.
Right.
Like, that would never happen in a healthy relationship. So just the instance of either of those things happening is like, wait a second here. What am I even doing?
Right.
Why am I even here?
Well, and the impact of both of them not being followed through with, like you said, I make a threat and then I don't hold it true, and I stay.
Right. Or you're like, I'm leaving.
I say I'm going to leave.
Yeah, and then you don't.
then I pack my stuff and I go and I come back. And then there's, you know, whatever, big makeup, whatever, right?
And I think, you know, in a healthy relationship, it's, oh, wait a second. I think sometimes when people do that, they're looking for a response from their partner.
Sure.
Wait, no, wait.
Yeah.
And when you're in the heat of the moment, that's not usually the response you get. You're
No.
like, whatever.
No.
You know, I've made decisions that were very poor
Right.
and very disrespectful to not only myself, but my partner in situations like that. And that's a time when you need to like back off and sit in your space a little bit and then maybe re-engage in a little while, right?
Sure.
Because once it gets to a yelling phase or a phase where you feel like making a threat or you feel like deciding to leave or whatever, that's a time when you need to, okay, let's walk away from this and re-engage maybe tomorrow or in a couple hours or whatever, or however you do it in your relationship. But, you know, I don't even know if that's a red flag. I think that's just the beginning of the end. You know, ultimatums and threats.
I think the ultimatums and the threats come from a place of feeling unheard, or just not being in a place where you're even at the same place, or you feel like your partner is completely not understanding you, or just disengaged completely, and you feel like that's your creative solution to get their attention, which makes no sense.
It doesn't.
It makes no sense.
And the interesting thing when we talk about relationships is the ultimatums and the threats. We keep saying that over and over because it's so mind-boggling to me that I would even be in a position like that where I'd have to do that.
Same.
Because the discussion should be, hey, you know, I'd love to be married. I'm still planning on being married. Or do you feel the same way? And you know, those questions. And if your partner says, well, no, I'm not. I kind of changed my mind. I don't really want to be married. Well, then you need to have the discussion if that works for you or not. And you know, we talk about a vacation or whatever. You know, hey, if I can only go to 2 days of your vacation, well, that doesn't work for me.
Right.
Right? And it's not an ultimatum. It's just like, hey, that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Is there, you know, I really want to be together. And if your partner's like, no, I already made plans with my friends. You're like, I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying? That doesn't really work in a relationship.
Well, but when we're in that position, when we were in that position, I think our desire to keep the peace and stay in the relationship was much bigger than our desire for our personal happiness. Because we didn't know what that was.
Why is that?
I didn't know what it was.
I know, but why?
Fear,
When we do that?
Fear of abandonment for me at the time.
Why were you scared?
Fear of abandonment, fear of being alone, not knowing how to be alone.
But why?
Not having the self-confidence to do it, not
Yep.
not knowing how to stand on my own two
There we
feet
go.
at the time.
Yep,
Absolutely,
exactly.
I know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, and that's me too.
Right.
And now that I know that, now if I put myself in a situation like that in the future, which I wouldn't be in the future,
yeah.
right? Because now you know.
Right.
And that's the whole purpose of this, right? Is like, okay, why would I be fearful? Oh, because I'm insecure.
Sure.
Oh, why am I insecure? Well, you know what I mean? Like, let's talk about it, you know? And that's the key things, and that's why we talk about all these red flags, is because if somebody's giving you ultimatums, if somebody's threatening you that they're going to leave, man, there's such a bigger problem.
Right.
And, you know, we talk about threats. Threats wouldn't always be to leave, but just making threats in general to somebody that you care about and that you love, that's a really unnecessary thing. It should be an unnecessary thing. It should be an unheard of thing in a healthy relationship.
Sure. It actually is an unheard of thing in a healthy relationship.
You would never do that.
No.
Now, when I was a kid, I saw it all the time, threats like that. Or, you know, my dad would be pissed off about something, be like, why don't you just leave? Or we should just get divorced. Or like, oh my God, that's so stupid. Like, why would you ever say that to somebody you care about?
But
maybe we shouldn't be together. Well, why don't you just go off with her then, or him, or like, really, dude, who says that stuff? And now, I think sometimes when you're in a place of weakness, or like we both agreed, we were in a place of lack and a place of low self-esteem, which I absolutely was, 100%.
I was.
You enable those habits and those behaviors because you accept it, and then you don't do anything about it. Like you said, I want to keep the peace. I don't want to get in a war. So I just don't want to deal with the inevitable right now.
Right.
And you just
I wasn't ready.
sugarcoat it or walk on eggshells, and fuck, that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
And when you're in a place where, you know, you can stand on your own 2 feet and you do have self-esteem, and you start a relationship from a healthy spot, those things won't happen because you won't let them happen.
No.
And we said, you know, in the beginning, when we started doing filming, collecting data, we talked about digitizing. We talked about coming from a place where you're confident and you have self-confidence, and when you meet somebody, you can evaluate that really quick.
Sure.
And you won't let somebody in your life that's not going to be healthy for you or that you can't communicate with. And that's the key thing. What we're talking about here is that those things wouldn't happen if you are healthy. And you do know how to be alone.
Right.
And you do know what's acceptable and not acceptable in a relationship. And that's what this is all about.
Right.
Is identifying that. Like, hey, this is okay and this is not okay.
Right.
It's not a frickin' opinion. You don't need to like read a book about it.
Right.
It's just common frickin' sense.
Yeah, and having the conversations from the get-go.
Yeah. And not only is it communication, but it's also respect. If you're not getting respect as an individual from somebody that you care about and love, that's a problem. That needs to be corrected.
Right.
It's not an option. It's not an opinion.
Right.
Right. And I'm not talking to you like that. I'm just saying, I'm talking in general.
So, yeah,
right?
people have a bad day here and there. And,
yeah, totally.
And then, you know, talk about that
sure,
too. But,
sure.
But it's just funny that as I sit here and listen to this and I think about it, I was using the very words that I was afraid of. I was using the words, I'm leaving, but I was afraid of leaving and being alone.
Sure. Well,
So it's just so fascinating that was the situation I put myself in.
You're saying what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're saying it. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, isn't it?
It is. It is.
And when we talk about people saying who they are all the time, let me clear my throat with some wine.
Please do.
You really are.
Yeah.
You're even in a fight. But at the same time, you could be like, hey, you know what? Last night I was drinking. That was really stupid of me to say. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean that. You could absolutely do that too. But at the same time, you're like, okay, we got an argument. We got a fight. You got that mad to say you're going to leave. What's going on?
What's going on?
You don't just leave it at that.
No.
It's not just an apology like, we're good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And the other thing too is there's a forgiveness in that. There's an acceptance in it. There's a compromise in it. There's a loving conversation. And it's not going to be a check mark like, oh, you fucked up last night. So, so now you're going to pay for that.
Well,
now I'm not going to talk to you for a week.
Then we go to scorekeeping.
Right. Now we're in scorekeeping. It's not like that. It's, hey, I forgive you. It happened. I'm not okay. You said you wanted to leave.
We're done.
But it happened. It's in the past. Now let's move forward. If it keeps happening over and over, another discussion.
Right.
But things happen like
Something
that
bigger,
sometimes in
something
relationships,
deeper.
right? Like no relationship's going to go without conflict. None.
None.
And it wouldn't be healthy if it did.
Right.
Because clearly somebody's not saying what they want or they need or whatever.
Sure. There's contrast everywhere.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, it's funny we even wrote that down. We should just write down deal breakers. Like that's a deal breaker. Like you don't give people ultimatums. You don't threaten them in a relationship. You don't threaten anybody for anything, you know?
No.
You know,
No.
but
and if you get what you want, it's not getting what you want.
yeah, because you have to force somebody to do it.
Right.
And then that creates conflict and resentment.
There's going to be resentment. Exactly.
Yeah, poor communication, poor relationship skills, which, you know, I've had. You know, and not the funny thing, the sad thing is I'm talking about my past. Like a lot of these things we talk about are things that, hey, these are red flags from my past relationships that I should have identified as unhealthy and a problem, or I should have never even let happen, which is what I'm doing now. So I know the incipient phase of what healthy looks like, but it'd be damn cool to be talking, you know, 5 years down the road when I actually have experience with a healthy relationship.
You will.
We both will, right? Everybody's
in
going
5
to.
years,
Hopefully,
we'll be having the conversation.
yeah. Hopefully, we all will.
Yeah.
And we can stop these habits and stop the poor treatment of somebody that you apparently care about or love or whatever,
Right.
and come from a place of respect. The other thing is your partner has to be on the same page as you.
Yes.
You can't have a partner that doesn't want to grow and doesn't want to be in a relationship and doesn't choose you, because sometimes they're going to treat you like crap and give you ultimatums and threats to get out
Right.
because
So
they actually want out.
You
They
have
just
to
can't
learn
say
to
it.
not accept that conversation as soon as you hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah. and
As much as you're willing to not say
Right.
it.
And like I said, I mean, a lot of times people create conflict because they do want out and they want you to respond.
Right.
Like a narcissist would want
Gaslight
you to
you.
respond. They want to gaslight you and be like, "Oh, really? You want to leave? Oh, blah, blah, blah." And they get like keep getting you up and up and up, and they'd be like, "Oh, cool. Oh, there you go. You blew up. Now I can go.
Yep.
And I can be the victim
See?
now."
Told you you were crazy.
Yeah, I told you. Yeah. And that's a whole nother game. But you know, just these little things right here, it identifies that, right? Having a responsibility and all those things. You know, we go back to that same list of things where if you ever talk to somebody who has no responsibility for their situation, no responsibility for their failed relationship, well,
Right.
you know, that's a huge problem in itself.
Right.
You know, as a friend or somebody that would listen or whatever, you'd be like, wait a second now, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. You can't do that.
Right.
Right. That's
Right.
just not acceptable. That's kind of like ultimatums and threats. I have no responsibility. I have no fault. That's not acceptable either.
I think the bigger thing for myself from the lesson perspective is having done that and then stepping back and looking at myself saying, what led me to do that? And like we just talked about, but I always, like after the fact, would sit down and have a conversation and just really put it out there
Yeah.
of what happened. Unfortunately, I wasn't with a great communicator and with a scorekeeper. So, you know, there was a whole lot of stuff.
Which
that,
you wouldn't be with now.
No, I wouldn't
You
be
wouldn't
with
let
now.
that happen
But
to begin
that's
with.
why it didn't resolve the way it should have.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So.
You know, you said something to me once. You said something one time about how you didn't know in the beginning. And I think that's possible.
Oh, very possible.
I think, but it also though, is if you keep your self-confidence and you stay healthy, when things start to get to that point, you can identify it right away.
Right.
And you can also be in a position always in your life where if that relationship were to end for whatever reason, if that's the healthy thing to do when it ends, then you're going to be okay. You can still be happy because you're not basing your happiness on a person, a place, or an outcome, right?
Sure.
Or a thing.
Right.
So just remembering that and having the tools that I have now. I have the tools.
Yes.
I can't wait to use them every day,
Yeah.
right? But we're using them now.
Right.
Just identifying this and having this conversation, we're using the tools now.
Yes.
And it's not bullshit. It's not an opinion. It's just,
No.
it is.
No,
It is what it is.
Working that muscle.
So
Yeah.
anyways.
Good stuff.
Ultimatum and Threats, Scott Freymuller and Shelly Netco with The Knot. We appreciate you watching.